This story is about Qin Cheng, an orphan since childhood, raised by old Master Lin. He was always despised in the house, and everyone wanted him to leave. For some unknown reason, when he got older, Mr. Lin wanted him to marry his granddaughter. But his granddaughter hated him and, even after 3 years of marriage, wouldn't let him touch her. He was basically treated as a slave. One day, both sisters plotted against our protagonist, framing him for molestation, resulting in him getting kicked out and brutally beaten by thugs. After a severe beating, he suddenly finds himself in a strange place and sees a big golden dragon flying in front of him. Our protagonist is surprised to see the dragon, but the dragon is disappointed in him and calls him pathetic, even after being the descendant of the dragon himself. Even though the dragon doesn't trust our protagonist with his inheritance, the protagonist is the only descendant. The dragon is none other than his father. Suddenly, the dragon takes a human form and gives him some magical power, creating a huge blast of aura inside our protagonist. Suddenly, our protagonist wakes up in front of a 10 out of 10 baddie. Our protagonist tries to stand up, but she tells him not to move because his injuries are severe. He is in a state of confusion after what just happened with the dragon and wonders if it's a dream or reality. Suddenly, someone informs the woman that the doctor has arrived. By the way, the girl's name is Miss Sue. Magically, the guy is completely healed from all the injuries. The girl is about to leave the protagonist with the doctor, but the guy thanks her and asks for her name. Our protagonist wants to return the favor of saving him. The girl looks back, surprised to find that all the injuries on the protagonist's body have somehow disappeared. The girl says not to thank her and that she saved the guy for her grandfather because he suffers from a chronic disease, and she helped him to collect some good karma for her grandpa to live a bit longer. The guy suddenly interrupts her and tells her he has some medical knowledge and wishes to see the grandfather. The girl somehow agrees and takes him to her grandfather. A doctor tells the grandfather that his problem isn't that serious and he will be fine by taking the medicine he prescribed. Suddenly, the protagonist enters and says that the problem is serious, and if the old man is not treated at once, his life would be in danger. This makes the doctor mad because he is the best doctor in the city and his diagnosis has never failed. How can someone like Chin object to his diagnosis? But suddenly, the old man begins to cough blood. The doctor is surprised by this, and the girl shouts at him to call for an ambulance. Suddenly, the protagonist says it is not the time for that, and places his hand on the old man's forehead. The girl tells Cheng that if he heals her grandfather, the Su family will be indebted to him. And with the power of the dragon, he begins to heal the grandfather. The power works so well that the grandfather feels like he is in heaven and instantly gets healed. Our protagonist is completely exhausted by using a vast amount of power. The old man tells him that he will remember the kindness and asks our protagonist about what he wants in return. The guy says he doesn't want anything because if it wasn't for Miss Sue, he would have been dead by now. The girl chuckles, gets close to him, and tells him it's no biggie. She then formally introduces herself as Miss Sue. The guy says it's nice to meet her and thanks her again. Inside the mind of our protagonist, he is amazed at the beauty of the girl. The girl then suddenly jumps on the protagonist and asks how much more time her grandfather has. But the grandfather interrupts and says that life and death are linked by fate and asks her not to worry about that. Grandpa then offers our protagonist to stay the night and enjoy the food, but suddenly our protagonist gets a text message on his phone. It's from the wife of our protagonist, who shows disappointment that Cheng is still alive after the beating he got and asks him to come home. The protagonist then says farewell to Grandpa and Sue, explaining he has some urgent matters and will be back for the treatment of Grandpa once he's done with his work. But Sue offers to give him a lift to his home, and they drive in her super luxurious car. After both of them are gone, Grandpa asks his bodyguard to follow Cheng and collect his details. The grandpa himself is a super rich dude who belongs to one of the famous families in the entire city. Our hero finally reaches home, only to find the thugs that attacked him wondering where he went. Suddenly, he is spotted by his wife, Lynn. His wife wastes no time in asking him for a divorce. Meanwhile, she introduces our protagonist to someone, her new future husband, who is the CEO of a large company. She tells our protagonist not to think that she's cheating because she never considered him her husband. But much to her surprise, our protagonist doesn't care because he has been treated as a servant for the past 3 years. The girl mockingly says that it's an honor for him to serve someone like her, and then tells him to sign the divorce papers and get out of her face. Our protagonist signs the divorce papers and rudely throws them at the face of his ex-wife and her future husband. The girl is not happy and follows him outside, asking how he dares to talk to her like that. But our protagonist is suddenly greeted by a familiar face. It's that beautiful girl from before. The protagonist asks her why she hasn't left yet and apologizes for making her wait so long. The beautiful girl, standing in front of her expensive car, tells him not to worry and says she got a call from her grandfather and he needed him. I think that's just an excuse because she has fallen head over heels for our guy. Both the ex-wife and her future husband are surprised to see a beautiful girl like her with someone like our protagonist and wonder if he had rented an actor just to tease them. The scene shifts to the old man's bodyguard reporting his findings about our protagonist. He says that the guy is just an ordinary man, doesn't belong to any special family, and is an orphan serving the Lin family. The old man is surprised by this finding and thinks to himself that he overestimated our protagonist because how can the disease be treated just by putting a hand on the patient's forehead? He thinks that maybe our protagonist might have just gotten lucky and doesn't have any superpower. The scene shifts back to our protagonist telling the girl that he needs to get ready before meeting her grandfather. They arrive at the home of this beautiful girl, and she tells him to ask the servants for anything he needs. The guy bids farewell and immediately knocks on the door. Now he nervously scratches his head, considering that he only received the inheritance from the dragon a short time ago and wonders how he could cure a serious illness of her grandfather. Suddenly, his medical power activates and a lot of magical books start rotating in front of him. These are medicinal skills, and their effectiveness depends on the amount of spiritual energy within the body of the protagonist. Among all of those books, he immediately notices a book on alchemy that can potentially treat the grandfather. He peeks out the door and asks a servant to help him prepare the medicine, as he needs some equipment for preparing it, and asks her to fetch them. The scene shifts back to Grandpa asking Dr. Sun for a way to treat him, but the doctor informs him that they cannot do the blood transfusion surgery because he is very old, and if he were 10 years younger, his body could have handled it. The girl asks her grandfather to let Shen Xing, our protagonist, heal him, but Grandpa is already skeptical of this idea as he thinks of our protagonist as an ordinary man. But suddenly, our protagonist comes running with a special pill, which he claims will be useful for Grandpa. The smell of that medicine is so foul that the doctor instantly throws up. Our protagonist explains that the pill is made from medicinal herbs, and since it's his first time making it, it may not be perfect, but it can definitely cure the old man's illness. The doctor asks the protagonist if he thinks he's some magical healer. The protagonist says that something may not seem amazing at first glance, but they have miraculous effects and insists the old man try it. The old man has had enough of it and asks our protagonist not to cause trouble here as the medicine is too filthy for him to eat. But with one glance from the doctor, he figures out that it is made from Chinese herbs, and that's why it wouldn't have any side effects. And he makes a bet that if this medicine ends up working, he'll apologize to our protagonist for his rude behavior. The old man, in the end, unwillingly decides to give it a try as it's not harmful. He somehow gulps the medicine down, and he begins to feel like he is bathing in a hot spring. It's like something is burning inside his body, but it's also soothing. By looking at his reaction, the girl asks her grandfather what has happened to him. The doctor is surprised to see that the old man is not only showing signs of improvement, but is also gaining vitality, meaning the blood transfusion can now be performed successfully. The doctor is very impressed by this and asks our protagonist about the medicine he gave to the old man, but our protagonist tells him It's a family secret. The old man is so happy that he ends up offering the entire villa to our protagonist, but our protagonist politely declines the offer. The old man insists, asking if his life is cheaper than a villa, making our protagonist finally accept the house. Our protagonist glances at the new house that he now owns, and it feels like a dream come true. Suddenly, he is confronted by familiar faces, his ex-wife and her future husband, who ask him what he is doing in a place like that. The protagonist informs them that he lives there now, as the house belongs to him. Both of them laugh, thinking he is joking, and to teach him a lesson, they call their special bodyguard, Gene Tiger. Gene arrives, ready to give our protagonist a beating of a lifetime, but suddenly his eyes land on Miss Sue. Miss Sue asks the bodyguard what he is doing here, and then orders him to kick out both the ex-wife and her husband. The tiger is so frightened that he instantly kneels down in front of the girl and tells her that he will take care of them. The bodyguard then turns back and lands a punch on the face of the ex-wife's future husband, telling them to never disrespect Miss Sue again. The husband asks the bodyguard why he is scared of that ordinary woman. The bodyguard tells them to humble down, as the woman is none other than Miss Sue of the Sue family of Binsheng.